beautiful. So it always makes us happy when we are crocheters and people love the work that we make. So I'm going to start with my slip knot. And so the very first thing, now you could do here at this point, you could have done a magic circle, but I found with these shawls, I like to do the chain 4 and then you join it with a slip stitch. I just think it gives a little bit more stability to the whole thing. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There's our 4, and then we're going to go back into this first loop, and we're going to draw our yarn through and through this again. That creates a slip stitch, and then that also creates a circle. Now we have a circle to work in. Of course, sometimes it's hard to see. You kind of have to stick your hook. Once you stick your hook in there and you start working in there, there it is, you'll be able to see it. It's actually right there. Okay, there you go. Now you can see the circle. So anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to do a chain 3, which is going to count as a double crochet. 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to yarn over. We're going to go right in the next 7 stitches. We're going to work right in that circle. So we're going to go put our hook through the circle, yarn over, bring it through, and we're going to create 7 double crochets. So here's 1. There we go. Yarn over, put it through the circle, yarn over again, yarn over, go through 2 loops and 2 loops. So now we actually have 3. So it's 1, 2, 3. We're going to have a total of 8 double crochets. Remember, we're counting this 3 first chain stitches as a double crochet. So that's 3, 4, 5, whoopsies, 5, 6, and I'm actually going to catch that yarn in here now because it's bugging me. And I didn't catch all the yarn loops here. There we go. And I believe that this was 7. Now that I've talked in between here, I lost my count. I'm pretty sure that's 7. I'm going to count in a second here. 8. So let's make sure that we have 8 double crochet in this circle. So here's our first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I kind of pulled them apart a little bit so you could see them. Okay? So that's actually our first round. So now we're going to turn this. After each row, you are going to turn it. Let me get the right one here. Okay. And again, we're going to do a chain 3. So 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to double crochet right back in that same stitch. There we go. And now in the next 7 stitches, we're going to do 2 double crochets in each stitch. So here's our first one, 2. So we're going to do this for each one. And I will have a stitch count chart for you on this too, because I did count in between each one to make sure I didn't skip loops, and I didn't want to have such a nice pretty thing be elongated the wrong way or have something happen. So I did count every single row. Okay, and we have this one more. See, we got the top chain right here, this top chain right here. From that initial chain 3, we have to go right in there. 1. Now we should have 16 stitches. So let's count. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Huh, look at that. I told you that was the top chain of the 3. It wasn't. That was still the top chain of this stitch. So that's why it's really good to count. Here's my top chain of the 3. See how smushed that got? How little? Right there is the one more. That's why it's really good to count. This is why it's imperative. So when somebody will say to me, oh, hey, I'm starting something and I worked on something and one side's, you know, it's going wonky on one side, not the other. Well, you might have slipped a stitch somewhere, and it might be a habit that you're doing each row. Okay, so I bet you we have our stitch count now. And normally I should dub that out, so not even tell you that I messed up, but I'm going to leave it in so that others can see that we're not all perfect. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. How about that? Now, doesn't that look nice? Okay, so we have the beginning slip stitch, we have row 1 down, and now row 2 down, and we have 16 stitches, and that's why it's really good to have our stitch count at the end of each row. Now, with row three is we're going to start our puff stitch, okay? And what's going to happen is you're going to end up adding in, so for each time we do each row is going to have 8 sections where you're going to do the 2 stitches together. You're always going to have that. So each row is always going to grow by 8 stitches, okay? So if you don't grow by 8 stitches, or if you grow by a different number than 8, then something's wrong. So you might have to recount your stitches in between. Because I had done that, I think twice on the shawl, where I had to take it out because I missed a stitch, or I added another stitch in extra. So that's why it's really important in our crochet. So anyway, so I'm going to turn this over. But then anyway, I should finish. So in between the areas where we do our 2 crochets together, each round we're going to end up adding, you will end up, by the time that you get to your double stitches, you'll have added a stitch in between each section, because as you look at the shawl, it becomes bigger and bigger, and each section is bigger, and there's like 8 different sections. So okay, so now we're going to work row 3. We're going to do a chain 3, 1, 2, 3. We're going to yarn over, and right in that same stitch we're going to work a puff stitch. So we're going to yarn over, bring it through, yarn over, put our hook back in, yarn over, bring it through, yarn over, put it back in, yarn over, bring it through, yarn over, put it back in, and yarn over, bring it through. There's 4 like half almost double crochets on here, but we should have 9 loops on the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This might be hard for you to see. 8, 9. Okay, I'm going to yarn over, and if I pull a little bit on this, okay, keep it taut, it helps us go through. And don't have your stitches real tight on your puff stitch either, because then it's going to be hard to get through. Okay, so now we have a double crochet and a puff stitch. So now we're just going to do a double crochet in the next stitch. All right, and then in the following stitch, we're going to do a double crochet and a puff stitch. So it's a double crochet, and then our puff stitch again. 1, 2, 3, 4, and we come through, and then the yarn over like that ends it off. Okay, I don't know if I showed you that on the beginning one. And then the next stitch is a double crochet, and then the following stitch we have our double crochet and our puff stitch. So there we go with our double crochet, and then we have our puff stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we close that off. And then we yarn over, and then we do our double crochet, and then the next one we do our double crochet and then a puff stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me see if I can bring this through. It's not wanting to sneak through. There's one little yarn. I can just barely see a little yarn hanging up. Sometimes you have to work it slowly like this because it just doesn't want to come. And sometimes you actually have to redo it. And I can't quite tell, so I'm going to redo it. This is how it goes, because I just can't quite see it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see if we can get this through easier. There we go. Slipped right through. And there we go. And so I'm going to continue doing this pattern of 1 double crochet, and then double crochet in the next stitch and a puff stitch. Okay, so I'm going to continue working this to the end, and we should have, when you're done, we should have, I gotta look, 24 stitches, okay, between the double crochets and the puff stitch. You should have a total of 24 stitches. So I'm going to meet you right on the other side here. I'm going to keep working this, and I just got a few more to go. I'm going to meet you right back over here, okay? Okay, I just finished my row 3 over here, and again, and what I did is I ended up with a double crochet, and you will end up however many stitches you have to put in between the rows. Like here it's 1, this row it's 1. So as you progress in each row, that's how many you're going to have after that last puff stitch. So here it's 1. The next row is going to be 2. So then you'll have 2 on this side after the. So So we're going to count. We got a double crochet and a puff stitch and a double crochet. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And that is correct. We're going to turn it and we're going to work on row 4. And now it's just the same pattern. You're just increasing the stitches in between each row. So a chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and a puff stitch back in that first one. So yarn over 1, 2, 3. Hang on, my yarn is catching. 4. And pull it through. There we go. One more to close it off. Okay. Now, when you're going to go on top of the puff stitch, this part here was just that part to close it off. Okay. I went into this part here because this was actually the stitch part. So this one here is what I went into to do my double crochet. So there's 1, and then on top of the next double crochet, 2. So now we're doing 2 after that. So in this one here, right here, now we're going to do our double crochet and then our puff stitch. Okay. And of course my daughter, you know, when I was first making that other, my shawl, she says to me, yeah, Mom, those are really cool. It looks like random little puff stitches. It's like, yeah, they're not random. I'm counting. It may look random. It does in the beginning. It looks like they're really random, like you're not even counting or having a care in the world. There we go. But as the shawl progresses, you'll see, to me, it looks like little footprints, and it's just, so here's my 2 double crochet, and then I do my next one, I do my double crochet and my puff stitch. So you can see how it's really coming along here. But as the shawl progresses, you'll be able to see, it really does look like rows of little footprints, and I think I did 4 on that. I didn't count. I'm going to have to go back and look. But this is just a sample. But you'll be able to see how you have an offset puff stitch. Every single row, you're going to have an offset little puff stitch, and then you turn it. The next row, you'll have 3 double crochet in between, and the next row is 4. Okay, so I'm going to have the stitch code chart and everything for you too. But here's how you work this lovely pattern. Here's how you start it. I'm currently on row 4. With row 4, I should end up with 32 stitches. So on the other side here, I should end up with 2 stitches past that last puff stitch. It's going to be over here. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to make sure I showed you working with this thin yarn here. I promised you that I would. This here is the actual skein. You can see it's about half used here to make this market bag. This is a Cotton King's Twirls. It's 100% cotton yarn. The color is number 7. And I believe that it's 874 yards. I'm not going to use quite all of this. It depends on what I end up doing with handles. I may crochet some handles yet, but there will be plenty to make the market bag with the increasing rows and the decreasing rows. So right here you can tell the shawl that I'm working on is just, I'm just starting to get into the first color change right here. And this is going to continue to get lighter as I move up the side where I'm decreasing. So I'm still on an increasing row. You increase to row 25, and then the next row you're going to start to decrease, and after that you'll decrease every row until the other side of the market bag looks just like your first row that you completed on this other side. So let me show you how that's done on this. I just want to make sure that you can see how this is done on this fingering yarn. So again, here's that previous row. We got the puff stitch, and then there was the double crochet after that. Okay, so let's do that puff stitch. Going to yarn over, bring our yarn through. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see it's really quite nice working with this yarn. And it's really kind of I call it a yarn, but I'm going to show you, it's really 4 little strands of thread that's held together. And it's going to hold up really nicely for this market bag. So we yarn over, and the next stitch we're going to double crochet. Here we go. And then every stitch we're going to double crochet to the end, but that was the increasing row. And then remember on the end, we're going to do a puff stitch and then a double crochet in that very last stitch. So I'm going to work the last section here all the way to the end, and then we'll work that puff stitch in the double crochet, and then I'll show you how to decrease. We're going to do 2 double crochets together twice, and so that takes care of the increasing stitch, and then it also decreases each section by 1 stitch. So I'm going to work over to here, and then we'll work that row. Okay, so let's do our decreasing row. We're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, yarn over, and then right in the same stitch we're going to do our puff stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, yarn over, bring a hook through, and yarn over, go through one more time. So the next 2 stitches we're going to yarn over. These next 2 double crochets, we're going to do a double crochet 2 together. We're going to turn these 2 stitches into 1. So we're going to yarn over, put our hook through, yarn over, go through 2 loops. You now have 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over, go to the next stitch, yarn over, go through 2 loops, and then yarn over, going through all 3 loops. So that turns those 2 stitches into 1. And we're going to do that one more time. Yarn over, go through the loop, yarn over, go through 2 stitches, yarn over, go through the next stitch, yarn over, go through 2 stitches, and yarn over, go through all 3 loops. That's 2 double crochet, and then together, and then we did another one. We repeated it. Now we are just going to continue with our pattern, doing a double crochet in each stitch until we get to the next puff stitch. So after every single puff stitch that you do from now on in each row, you're going to do 2 double crochet together, and you're going to do that twice. Again, that's going to take care of the increase that we do, because remember, we have that double crochet right where that puff stitch is, and the reason that I've done that is to keep our footprints in the sand here, these puff stitches all lined up symmetrically throughout the market bag, and it'll look the same on both sides as you turn the pattern and look at it. So when we get over here, right after we do our puff stitch, that's where we're going to do, both of these are going to go together, 2 double crochet together, and then both of these will. So I wanted to make sure that you were able to see how this works with this fingering yarn. Again, you can refer back to the larger yarn that I used at the beginning of this video. Otherwise, I don't have the handles figured out yet. I think I'm going to do a couple different variations of the handles on the bags, but I wanted to at least make sure that you saw this part of it worked in this fingering yarn. Today I'm going to show you how to work the handle on this market bag. I've shown you how to work the first part of it, and remember, this is a variegating yarn. Of course, it's hard to tell because this is all the yarn that I have left, so it all looks like lighter. This does get even lighter yet, but it started off this darker color, and then as I moved throughout the skein, it got lighter and lighter and lighter, and of course, so now the handle's a little bit lighter. So what I did for the handle here, you can see that the bag is nice and light, but it's made out of this cotton and it's very strong. So what I did is I just joined the yarn, and I did 5 single crochet stitches across, and I did about 25 rows, and I joined it on the other side. I made sure that I went back and forth and back and forth. Did a couple knots too as I weaved my yarn ends through. So I'm just going to show you how I joined the yarn and how I work the stitches, just so you get an idea of how to do the handle on this bag. Okay, so this is actually a green one that I've done. This again was worked in another Cotton King Twirls. This one is a number 07 for the color, and as you can see, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter as we go, and I've used about, I don't know, maybe half of this skein, so I might be able to work another one. I'm not quite sure, but it takes about half the skein to do it, and this skein is 874 yards, but to be on the safe side, I'd probably say somewhere in the 400 to 500 yards that you would need to complete this pattern. And so what I do is I fold it in half. So I got my 2 sides here, and here's the darker side, here's the lighter side, here's the bottom, and so this is my center point. So what I'm going to do is join my yarn and work it from probably here to here. And then I'm going to just start single crocheting, and I'm going to do it across this way instead of, you know, chaining 25 and then coming back, because I think that if I did that, it would stretch. And I think that by going back and forth, the handle will stay a little bit more taut. Okay, so this is the center, right about the center here. I'm going to do five single crochets. That's what I did in my other bag, and that seemed to be a nice width for me. You can make this, and tighten that up, you can make this a wider strap, or you can make it a shorter strap than I did. So I'll chain one as my first single crochet, and I'm just going to single crochet, kind of easing it through. There's 2, and I'll put the next one here, 3, 4, and I'll go on the other side here, 5. And I'm going to chain 1, turn it, and then go right back in that same stitch. 1. It's a little bit hard to see because my yarn that I carried got bunched up. 2, 3, 4. Come on. There we go. 5. And we'll go a chain, which doesn't count as anything, it's just a turning chain. Go right back into that first stitch. So I did 25 rows of this. Again, you could make this wider. You could make this longer as a handle. You can make this shorter as a handle. And it is a contrasting color, especially from the darker side. But because I'm using a skein of yarn, and this is going to be a little bit tight here, we're going to work on, there we go, we pushed it through. There we go. But anyways, I did this all the way to the other side, and then I joined the other side, and I eased it along just like this, and I made sure that I fold, you know, you fold the other side, excuse me, so it joint, you know, so you have the bag hanging nice and neat, and here's where the fold spot is. And I'm going to show you again on this one, on the blue one. Make sure that your strap is straight. So I started on this end, and by the time that I got done weaving it in, you can see that you can't, it looks quite a bit different than it does here, because I weaved it back and forth, and in and out of the green and underneath. I used the yarn needle to do that. I made sure that I got it really nice and snug, even did a couple knots. That's very secure in it. Also, I made, of course, make sure that it's laying flat when you join it on the other side, and here's the other side. I did the same thing, and I think that this is a really pretty market bag. And again, the lighter side looks well with this, and of course you also have the darker side, but it's just a really beautiful bag that expands enormously if you need it to. It's very light. You could pack this away in your purse. You know, think about it. Look at how small I can make this, right? I can get this in between my hands if I crinkle it up. You could pack this away somewhere in your trunk, somewhere nice, and when you bring it out, it's beautiful. It's not wrinkled. It has texture to it. I just love this. And this pattern that I have here, where the expanding part is the same as the footprints in the sand shawl. So you might want to give that a try too if you have not given that a try. Because if you take a look, you know, I have that lovely texture in here, and it is kind of an offset bobble stitch. Love that. So, and you can see here where I decreased rows on one side and I increased rows. This is the side I ended on, and this was the side that I started on. This is the opposite side, so I just did the opposites. I hope that you enjoy this market bag, and I hope you have a chance to make many. As you can see, I've made a couple already, and there's going to be a couple more on my to-do list. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Take care.